The first time Adrian Whitmore saw Evelyn Carter, she was standing in the rain outside a Queens daycare with a broken umbrella, a paper grocery bag splitting open at her feet, and a little boy in a yellow raincoat holding tightly to her hand. She looked nothing like the kind of woman his family would approve of. Her coat was worn at the cuffs, her shoes were practical instead of elegant, and her dark hair had been twisted into a careless knot that the wind had nearly destroyed. Yet she did not look defeated. That was what unsettled him most. Everyone else in New York seemed to bend beneath the city's pressure. But this woman stood beneath the storm as if she had once survived something far worse. Adrian had not come to Queens looking for a bride. He had come because his driver took a wrong turn after a meeting that had nearly ended his career. By morning, the board of Whitmore Holdings would receive a petition to remove him as CEO. By the end of the week, his uncle and chief rival Victor Whitmore would control the real estate empire Adrian's father had built. And unless Adrian fulfilled the final clause in his father's private trust, he would lose not only his voting shares, but the last protection standing between his company and Victor's greed. The clause was absurd, old-fashioned, and cruelly timed. Adrian had to be married before his 35th birthday, and the marriage had to appear stable enough to satisfy the trustees. His birthday was in 6 days. Then the woman in the rain stepped off the curb, her son's hand in hers, just as a black sedan ran the light. Adrian moved before he thought. He pulled them both back hard enough that the grocery bag burst across the sidewalk. Apples rolled into the gutter. The little boy began to cry. The woman did not. She only looked at Adrian, looked at the sedan disappearing into traffic, and said, in a steady voice, "That was not an accident." Adrian should have walked away. Instead, he asked her name. And by midnight, the most powerful unmarried CEO in Manhattan would be sitting at a kitchen table in Queens, offering a desperate single mother a contract that would change all their lives. Evelyn Carter lived in a narrow walk-up apartment above a closed tailor shop where the radiators hissed all night, and the hallway smelled faintly of old paint and garlic from the neighbor downstairs. Her son Noah was 6 years old, bright-eyed, careful with strangers, and too polite for a child who had already learned to count money before asking for cereal. Evelyn worked mornings at a neighborhood legal aid office, afternoons doing bookkeeping for a small bakery, and weekends helping an elderly landlord manage rental paperwork. She was on paper exactly what Adrian needed, a woman far outside the circles of Manhattan society, unknown to the press, unlikely to attract scandal, and poor enough that a generous contract would seem impossible to refuse. Adrian presented the arrangement as cleanly as he would present a merger. 6 months of marriage, separate rooms, full financial support for Evelyn and Noah, medical coverage, a trust for Noah's education. In return, Evelyn would appear beside him at public events, move into his penthouse, and convince the trustees that Adrian had not married only to satisfy a clause. He expected shocked gratitude, perhaps suspicion. He did not expect Evelyn to read every page of the agreement in silence, take out a red pen from a cracked ceramic mug, and begin correcting the language. She changed the childcare provision first, then the confidentiality section, then a clause about public appearances that she called too vague to survive a hostile interpretation. Adrian watched her with the first stirrings of curiosity. "You said you work in legal aid," he said. "I do," Evelyn replied without looking up. "You sound like a corporate attorney." "I sound like a woman who reads before she signs." It was the first time in months anyone had spoken to him without fear, flattery, or ambition. Adrian almost smiled. Evelyn agreed before dawn, but not because she trusted him. She agreed because Noah needed stability, because the rent had gone up twice in 1 year, and because the sedan outside the daycare had frightened her more than she allowed anyone to see. She had been living quietly for years, keeping her head down, refusing help from people whose help came with chains. But the city was closing in. Whoever had found her once could find her again. Adrian's world was dangerous, but it was also guarded, documented, watched. For a little while, his penthouse might be the safest place to hide. The wedding happened in a private room at City Hall. with two witnesses, a judge who owed the Whitmore family a favor, and Noah standing between them in a borrowed suit jacket too big for his shoulders. The photographs released to the press were elegant and controlled. Adrian Whitmore, billionaire, CEO, had married Evelyn Carter, a devoted single mother from Queens. The story exploded by lunchtime. Manhattan society called it romantic. Business journalists called it strategic. Victor Whitmore called it pathetic. Adrian brought Evelyn and Noah to the penthouse that evening. It occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower overlooking Central Park, with marble floors, silent elevators, and windows so wide, the city looked like a kingdom made of light. Noah pressed both hands to the glass and whispered that the taxis looked like toy cars. Evelyn stood behind him carrying one suitcase and took in the room with a calm that irritated Adrian. Most people were dazzled by wealth. Evelyn looked at it the way one might look at a hotel lobby, impressive, temporary, and not entirely safe. The first week was a performance. Evelyn learned where to stand beside Adrian when photographers appeared outside the building. She learned to smile without revealing too much. She learned the names of board members, trustees, cousins, donors, and old family friends who spoke sweetly while searching for weakness. At dinners, she listened more than she talked. When spoken to as if she were a charity case, she answered with such gentle precision that the insult returned to its owner looking polished and harmless. Adrian told himself he appreciated her usefulness, nothing more. Still, he began noticing things. At a trustees' luncheon, an older attorney asked Evelyn whether she understood the obligations of marrying into a family with substantial holdings. Evelyn answered by referencing a trust precedent from Delaware that made the attorney put down his fork. At a charity gala, when a senator's wife approached with the cold smile of a woman trained in social warfare, Evelyn greeted her by name and asked after a private foundation that had not yet been publicly announced. The senator's wife went pale for half a second, then treated Evelyn with sudden respect. At night, Adrian sometimes passed the library and heard Evelyn speaking quietly on the phone. Her voice was different then, not softer, but sharper. The voice of someone used to being obeyed by powerful people. "No," she said once, not knowing Adrian stood outside the door. "Do not move unless I call you. If they learn where I am too soon, they will use the boy." "The boy, Noah." Adrian stepped away before she saw him carrying the sentence with him like a stone in his pocket. Noah adapted faster than either adult expected. He was careful at first, asking permission before touching anything, leaving his shoes lined up perfectly near the door, apologizing whenever he spilled a drop of juice. Adrian, who had never spent much time around children, found this politeness painful. One evening, he discovered Noah asleep at the dining table over a book about bridges. A pencil had rolled beneath his hand. On the page, the child had drawn a tower with a tiny garden on the roof. "He likes buildings," Evelyn said from the doorway. "So did I," Adrian replied before he could stop himself. That was how their first real conversation began. Not about contracts, money, or public appearances, but about architecture, childhood dreams, and the strange loneliness of growing up in rooms too large for honest laughter. Adrian told Evelyn how his father built affordable housing before luxury towers made the family famous. Evelyn told him that Noah used to build cities out of cereal boxes on the kitchen floor. Neither of them mentioned that their marriage was fake. But outside the penthouse, Victor was not idle. Victor Whitmore had spent 20 years waiting for Adrian to make a mistake. Charming in public and ruthless in private, he believed Whitmore Holdings belonged to him by right of age and appetite. Adrian's father had never trusted him, which Victor considered an unforgivable insult. Now Adrian's sudden marriage threatened the plan Victor had carefully built, challenge the trust win over the board force, a sale of key properties, and break the company into pieces, rich enough to feed every ally who had backed him. Evelyn, however, complicated the narrative. The public adored her. A billionaire marrying a struggling single mother made Adrian appear human for the first time in years. Images of Noah holding Adrian's hand outside a children's museum softened even the hardest headlines. Stockholders liked stability. Employees liked the idea that their distant CEO might have a heart. Victor decided to make Evelyn look like a fraud. The first attack came through the tabloids. Anonymous sources claimed Evelyn had trapped Adrian for money. Old photographs of her in inexpensive uniforms appeared online. A former landlord gave an interview, implying she had always been too secretive. Commentators debated her worth as if she were a stock price. Adrian expected tears, anger, or retreat. Evelyn made coffee, opened 3 laptops across the breakfast table, and began mapping the leak. These stories were placed in sequence, she said. Adrian looked up from his phone. You can tell that from headlines. I can tell it from timing, phrasing, and which outlets were given which parts. This was coordinated. Not very elegantly. Within 4 hours, she had identified the public relations firm behind the smear campaign. Within 6, Adrian's legal team had sent carefully worded notices. By evening, 2 articles were amended. One source withdrew a statement, and a columnist who had mocked Evelyn posted a sudden apology. Adrian's chief counsel, Martin Hayes, called him privately. "Where did you find this woman?" Martin asked. "In Queens," Adrian said. "No, you did not." Adrian did not answer. The second attack came through the board. Victor arranged an emergency vote to review Adrian's leadership, claiming the marriage had been reckless and the trust clause improperly satisfied. Evelyn was asked to attend likely, so Victor could humiliate her in front of the directors. She arrived in a navy dress Adrian had not seen before, simple and severe, with her hair pinned low. Noah stayed upstairs with a tutor and 2 security guards. Victor smiled when Evelyn entered. "Mrs. Whitmore, how generous of you to join us. I imagine this room feels unfamiliar." Evelyn returned the smile. "Not as unfamiliar as you hoped." The directors shifted. Adrian glanced at her, but she did not look at him. Victor's attorney began with polite questions. How long had she known Adrian? What did she understand about the trust? Was she aware that a marriage entered into for financial advantage could be challenged? Evelyn answered calmly, never offering more than necessary. When the attorney tried to corner her with the contract, Evelyn asked him to define coercion under New York law. When he stumbled, she waited. The silence was devastating. Adrian should have felt grateful. Instead, he felt something more dangerous: admiration. That night, after the vote failed to remove him, Adrian found Evelyn on the balcony. The city glittered below, bright and indifferent. She had taken off her heels and wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "You have done this before," he said. "Done what?" "Sat in rooms full of powerful men and made them regret underestimating you." Evelyn looked out over the skyline. Most powerful men regret very little. That is usually the problem. "Who are you?" She turned then, and for the first time he saw fear under her composure. Not fear of him, but fear of the answer. "I am Noah's mother," she said. "For now, that is all you need to know." Adrian wanted to press her. He did not. Some instinct told him that whatever Evelyn was hiding had teeth, and if he forced it into the open too soon, Noah would be the one to bleed from it. Weeks passed, and the fake marriage began to develop real habits. Adrian stopped scheduling breakfast meetings because Noah liked pancakes on Tuesdays. Evelyn began leaving notes on documents Adrian brought home, at first because she could not help herself, later because he asked. Adrian's penthouse, once curated to impress guests, began changing in small ways. A bowl of apples appeared on the kitchen island. Noah's drawings took over one side of the study. Evelyn bought cheap yellow flowers from a vendor near the park and placed them in a crystal vase worth more than her old apartment's annual rent. The house became less beautiful and more alive. Adrian found himself coming home earlier. He learned that Noah hated mushrooms, loved elevators, and believed all buildings should have secret rooms. He learned that Evelyn hummed old soul songs when she cooked and checked every window lock before bed. He learned that she woke from nightmares without making a sound. One night, he found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m., standing barefoot in the dark with a glass of water untouched in her hand. "Bad dream?" he asked. "Old memory?" He waited. She looked at him with tired eyes. There is a difference. That was all she offered. But when she went back to her room, Adrian remained in the kitchen, understanding for the first time that Evelyn had not climbed into his world for comfort. She had entered it, like a woman crossing a bridge, while watching both ends burn. Meanwhile, Victor shifted tactics. If public shame could not break Evelyn, perhaps doubt could. He sent Adrian a private file containing fragments of her past sealed court records, missing employment years, unexplained transfers, photographs of Evelyn entering government buildings in Washington years earlier. One image showed her beside a silver-haired man. Adrian recognized immediately Senator Malcolm Reeves, one of the most influential political figures in the country. The message beneath the file was simple. "Your wife is lying to you." Adrian stared at the photograph until the edges blurred. When Evelyn entered the study, he did not hide the file. She saw the screen and stopped. "Victor sent it," she said. "You know that for certain." "I know his type." "Then tell me it is fake." She did not. The silence struck harder than denial would have. Adrian closed the laptop. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "When it was safe." "For whom?" Her face tightened. "For my son." The argument that followed was quiet, which made it worse. Adrian accused her of using him as a shield. Evelyn accused him of pretending their arrangement had not always been transactional. He said she had brought danger into his home. She said danger had been in his home long before she arrived. It simply wore better suits. Noah heard enough from the hallway to grow silent at breakfast the next morning. For 2 days, Adrian and Evelyn became polite strangers again. They performed affection in public, discussed schedules through assistants, and avoided being alone. The penthouse cooled around them. Noah noticed everything. Children always do. On the 3rd evening, Adrian came home to find Noah building a paper tower on the floor near the library. The tower leaned badly. "It keeps falling," Noah said. Adrian sat beside him. "The base is too narrow." Noah considered this. "Mom says things fall when people hide cracks." Adrian looked towards the closed bedroom door where Evelyn had disappeared an hour earlier. "Your mom is very smart." "She is scared," Noah said. The words landed gently but deeply. Adrian turned back to the paper tower. "Did she tell you that?" "No. She smiles too much when she is scared." That night, Adrian knocked on Evelyn's door. "I do not need every secret," he said when she opened it, "but I need enough truth to protect you both." Evelyn looked exhausted. For a moment, she seemed younger than he had ever seen her, not weak, only tired of standing alone. "My mother was born into one of the oldest political families in Washington," she said. "She left before I was born. She wanted a normal life, or as close as she could get. When she died, people came looking for me. Not because they loved me. Because bloodlines matter to people who build power like property." Adrian listened without interrupting. "The Reeves family is not just wealthy. They shape elections, judgeships, policy careers. My grandfather wanted to bring me into that world. I refused." Later, when Noah was born, the pressure became worse. There were offers, threats, custody challenges dressed up as concern. I disappeared into New York under my mother's name. I thought if I stayed small enough, they would eventually stop looking. "Did they?" Adrian asked. "Number?" The answer was simple, and it changed the air between them. Adrian wanted to ask about Noah's father, but Evelyn's face made clear that some doors were not ready to open. Instead, he said, "Then we stop pretending this is only my war." Evelyn studied him. "And what do you want in return?" "The truth when it matters. And if the truth costs you your company." Adrian thought of Victor, the trust, the glass tower, the boardroom, the endless hunger of men who mistook inheritance for destiny. Then he thought of Noah, asleep beneath a blanket printed with blue rockets. "Then I built something else," he said. It was the first promise between them that had nothing to do with a contract. The next phase of Victor's plan unfolded during the Whitmore Foundation Gala, an annual event held at a museum overlooking the park. The city's wealthiest donors attended in black tie. Cameras flashed along the carpet. Adrian and Evelyn arrived hand in hand, Noah safely at home with trusted security and his tutor. Evelyn wore ivory silk, her only jewelry a pair of small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. Adrian could not stop looking at her. For the first hour, everything went perfectly. Adrian gave a speech about housing access and community investment, words that once would have sounded like branding, but now carried pieces of Evelyn's influence. Donors applauded. Reporters asked kinder questions. Even skeptical board members seemed pleased. Then Senator Malcolm Reeves entered. The room changed around him. Conversations softened. Backs straightened. People who believed themselves powerful made space without being asked. He was tall, silver-haired, and calm in the practiced way of men who had never needed to hurry. His eyes found Evelyn across the room. Adrian felt her hand tighten around his. "Granddaughter," the senator said when he reached them. The word rippled outward. Cameras lifted. Whispers spread. Evelyn did not move. "Senator, is that all?" "That is all you have earned." A lesser man might have flinched. Senator Reeves only smiled. To the room it looked like a family reunion. To Adrian it looked like a negotiation at the edge of a cliff. The senator spoke softly enough that nearby guests leaned in without realizing it. "You have made a spectacle of yourself. I learned from professionals. You cannot hide behind this marriage forever." "I am not hiding." "No," the senator said, glancing at Adrian. "You are bargaining with a man who does not understand your value." Adrian stepped forward. "I understand enough." The senator looked at him, then assessing him as one might assess a building marked for demolition. "Mr. Whitmore, your family buys skylines. Mine decides who gets to keep them." Before Adrian could answer, Evelyn touched his sleeve. It was not a plea. It was restraint. The photographs from that night dominated the news by morning. Evelyn was no longer the poor single mother from Queens. She was Evelyn Reeves Carter, hidden granddaughter of Senator Malcolm Reeves, potential heir to one of Washington's most guarded dynasties. Half the media praised the romance as a union between money and power. The other half accused Adrian of orchestrating the marriage to gain political influence. Victor pushed the second narrative hard. Adrian's board panicked. Investors called. Reporters camped outside the tower. Evelyn's old neighborhood was swarmed, forcing Adrian to quietly relocate her former neighbors to hotel rooms until the frenzy passed. Noah's school received so many calls that he had to stay home. For the first time, Noah asked if the bad people knew his name. Evelyn knelt in front of him and took both his hands. "Some people are curious because they do not understand boundaries. But you are safe. You are loved. And none of this is your fault." Adrian stood in the doorway listening. The protective anger that rose in him was unlike anything he had felt in business. Boardroom betrayal made him cold. A child's fear made him dangerous. He increased security, but Evelyn warned him that visible walls sometimes invited stronger attacks. She contacted people she had once avoided, a former federal judge who had known her mother, a campaign strategist who owed her a favor, a retired investigator with a voice like gravel. Adrian watched names appear on encrypted calls and private calendars. The poor woman from Queens had vanished. In her place stood someone who understood networks of influence with unsettling fluency. "You could have crushed Victor weeks ago," Adrian said one evening as she reviewed documents at the dining table. "Perhaps. Why didn't you?" "Because powerful families rarely move alone. If I struck too early, I would only reveal myself. Now Victor thinks he is using my grandfather. My grandfather thinks he is using Victor. They are both wrong." Adrian sat across from her. "And what am I doing?" Evelyn looked up, choosing. The words stayed between them. Their closeness returned differently after that. It was no longer the accidental warmth of shared breakfasts and small domestic habits. It was conscious, careful, and charged with the knowledge that either one of them could still walk away and be safer for it. Adrian began trusting Evelyn, not because he understood every part of her past, but because he saw what she did with power when she had it. She used it reluctantly, precisely, and always with Noah in mind. Evelyn began trusting Adrian for a different reason. He had opportunities to abandon her when the headlines turned ugly. When the board demanded distance, when Senator Reeves offered him a private path to political protection in exchange for separating from her, Adrian refused. Publicly. At a press conference outside Whitmore Holdings, a reporter asked whether Adrian regretted marrying a woman whose background had brought instability to his company. Adrian looked into the cameras. My wife brought truth into a company that had grown too comfortable with polished lies. If that causes instability, then perhaps the foundation needed to shake. Evelyn watched from inside the lobby, unseen by the cameras, and pressed her fingertips to her lips. Victor's patience ended soon after. Unable to win through gossip or boardroom pressure, he arranged the final move during a family court charity event where Evelyn had agreed to speak about legal aid for single parents. The event was public enough to seem safe, controlled enough to be predictable, and crowded enough for confusion. Noah attended only because the program included children's drawings to be displayed in the lobby. Adrian had objected. Evelyn had hesitated. Noah had begged to show his drawing of the rooftop garden tower. Security was heavy, but Victor had always been good at buying doors rather than breaking them. The afternoon began gently. Evelyn spoke with quiet force about dignity housing and the way poverty often punished parents for asking for help. Adrian stood in the back of the room, moved despite himself. Noah's drawing hung near the entrance, labeled in careful block letters, "A house with sky for everyone." Then a fire alarm sounded. Not fire, alarm. Evelyn knew it instantly. So did Adrian. People began moving toward exits. Staff tried to guide guests. Cameras swung wildly. In the confusion, Noah's tutor turned to answer a question from a woman wearing an event badge. When she looked back, Noah was gone. The world narrowed to Evelyn's face. No scream, no collapse. Just a stillness so complete that Adrian felt the room tilt. A message arrived on his phone 30 seconds later. Transfer controlling shares by midnight. No police, no press. Instructions to follow. There was no image attached, no cruel proof. Only Noah's small blue backpack left near a service corridor. Adrian wanted to tear the building apart with his bare hands. Evelyn took the phone from him, read the message once, and closed her eyes. When she opened them, the woman from Queens was gone. "Seal every exit camera," she said to Adrian's head of security. "Do not call the police on open lines. Martin, contact Judge Bellamy and tell her I am invoking the emergency packet. Use the phrase my mother taught you. Adrian, call your pilot, but do not file a flight plan yet." Everyone stared. Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Move." They moved. Adrian followed her into a private office, where she opened a secure laptop from a bag he had never seen before. Within minutes, faces appeared on encrypted video: the retired investigator, the former judge, a woman from the Department of Justice, who did not introduce herself, and an older man with the bearing of someone used to command centers. Evelyn gave instructions without panic. She requested traffic feeds, badge logs, donor lists, private security rosters, and access to a network of cameras that Adrian was fairly certain civilians were not supposed to access. "Evelyn," he said quietly. She did not look away from the screen. "Not now. My shares do not matter." That made her turn. "I will sign anything," Adrian said. "I will give Victor the company. I will give Reeves whatever he wants. We get Noah back first." For 1 second, her composure cracked. Beneath the strategist, the hidden heiress, the woman trained by survival, there was only a mother with terror in her eyes. Then she reached for his hand. "We are getting him back. But we are not giving them the weapon they want. If Victor controls your company, and my grandfather controls my fear, this will never end." The plan unfolded across the longest hours of Adrian's life. The people who had taken Noah had not harmed him. They had moved him to a private townhouse owned through layers of shell companies connected to Victor's allies. Evelyn insisted on language that kept every update careful and calm. Noah was described as safe, but held never in words that would amplify fear. The team confirmed he had been given food, a blanket, and cartoons to keep him quiet. It did not lessen the violation. It kept Evelyn breathing. Victor called at 8:17 p.m. His voice was smooth. "You understand now," he said. "Family is leverage." Adrian nearly answered, but Evelyn pressed mute. "Let him talk," she whispered. Victor talked. He blamed Adrian for arrogance, Evelyn for deception, Senator Reeves for interfering in Whitmore affairs. He demanded signed transfer documents, a public resignation, and Evelyn's written agreement to meet privately with her grandfather after the transaction. There it was, the second trap. Victor had not acted alone. Senator Reeves wanted Evelyn back under family control. Victor wanted Whitmore Holdings. Each thought the other was a tool. Evelyn unmuted the phone. "Uncle Victor," she said, her voice soft enough to sound almost kind. "You should have researched my mother more carefully." A pause. Then Victor laughed. "You are in no position to perform," no, Evelyn said. "I am done performing." At 9:02 p.m., three things happened at once. A judge signed an emergency order freezing Victor's voting influence pending investigation into coercive conduct and misuse of company resources. A national news outlet received verified documents exposing Victor's shell companies and the manufactured smear campaign against Evelyn. And Senator Reeves received a private call from Evelyn herself, informing him that every attempt he had made to pressure her through custody threats, political intermediaries, and financial coercion had been documented for years. "You would not dare," the senator said. Evelyn stood in Adrian's study, surrounded by screens, her wedding ring catching the light. "I dared the day I kept my son away from you. You are my blood. I am my mother's daughter." The words ended something. The recovery of Noah was handled quietly by professionals with legal authority, not spectacle. There were no dramatic explosions, no public chase through the streets, no images that would follow a child for the rest of his life. There was only a coordinated entry into a townhouse. A frightened little boy, wrapped in a blanket, and Adrian arriving seconds after Evelyn, because the team had insisted she wait until the building was secure. Noah ran to her so fast, one of his shoes came loose. Evelyn dropped to her knees and caught him holding him with a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a prayer. Adrian stopped a few feet away, afraid to intrude on a bond older than his place in their lives. Then Noah lifted his face from his mother's shoulder and reached one arm toward him. Adrian crossed the distance. The three of them stayed that way, beneath the townhouse porch light, while cameras were held back. Statements were delayed, and New York for once was made to wait. The aftermath was not instant peace. Real endings rarely are. Victor was removed from the board and faced a long chain of legal consequences. His allies scattered quickly, each claiming ignorance with the confidence of people who had practiced it. Senator Reeves announced a temporary withdrawal from public life for family reasons, but the phrase fooled no one who mattered. Evelyn did not celebrate. She simply made sure every door he had used to reach her son was closed, locked, and documented. Adrian kept his company, but not unchanged. The crisis stripped Whitmore Holdings down to its bones. He removed executives loyal to Victor, expanded the housing initiative his father had once cared about, and appointed independent oversight to projects that had long been handled in shadows. Some called it moral theater. Others called it strategy. Adrian knew the truth was more personal. He had nearly lost a child who was not his by blood, and discovered that legacy meant nothing if it could not shelter the innocent. Evelyn and Noah returned to the penthouse because Noah asked to go home. Home. The word startled both adults. For several weeks, life became quiet, in the way people are quiet after a storm. Noah slept with a nightlight again. Evelyn stayed close to him, reading until he drifted off, checking on him, even when Adrian promised the floor was secure. Adrian learned not to tell her she was overreacting. Fear did not vanish because danger ended. It loosened slowly one ordinary morning at a time. Their contract still existed. 6 months, separate rooms, financial terms, public obligations. It sat in a drawer in Adrian's study, suddenly ridiculous, in the face of everything that had happened. One snowy evening about 5 months after City Hall, Evelyn found Adrian on the balcony, where they had once argued about secrets. The city below was softened by winter. She wore one of his coats over her sweater because she had stopped pretending not to borrow it. The trustees confirmed the marriage, satisfied the clause, she said. "I know, and Victor can no longer challenge your control. I know that too. So we should discuss what happens when the contract ends." Adrian turned from the skyline. "Is that what you want?" Evelyn looked down at her hands. She had faced senators, lawyers, boardrooms, cameras, and the kind of fear that empties the world of sound. Yet this question made her hesitate. "I spent years making choices only around survival," she said. "Where to live, who to trust, Which name to use? How small to become? I do not want to choose from fear anymore. And what would you choose? She looked at him then. A home where Noah can leave his drawings on the walls. A life where I do not have to hide every strong part of myself to be safe. A man who does not mistake protection for control. Adrian's voice lowered. That sounds very specific. It is. He crossed the space between them slowly, giving her time to step back. She did not. I would choose you, he said. Not because of the trust. Not because of the company. Not because the world believes we are already married in every way that counts. I would choose you if you still lived above the tailor shop. I would choose you if I had to build from nothing. And I would choose Noah's paper towers over every skyline my family owns. Evelyn laughed softly, though her eyes shone. That is a dangerous promise from a real estate CEO. Then hold me to it. Their first kiss was not staged for cameras, not negotiated in a contract, not performed beneath chandeliers for trustees. It happened quietly on a cold balcony above Manhattan, with snow settling on the railing and the city blurred into gold below. It felt less like a beginning than a truth finally spoken aloud. When the 6-month date arrived, Martin Hayes delivered the termination papers out of habit. Adrian left them unsigned on the kitchen island. Evelyn found them beside Noah's cereal bowl, read the first page, and raised an eyebrow. No red pen? Adrian asked. She picked up the papers, tore them neatly in half, and dropped them into the recycling bin. No need, she said. Terrible contract. Noah looked up from his pancakes. Does that mean we are staying? Adrian glanced at Evelyn. She nodded once. It means, Adrian said, sitting beside him, that this is home as long as you both want it to be. Noah considered this with great seriousness. Can we build the rooftop garden now? Evelyn smiled. Adrian looked toward the windows where the city rose in steel and glass, waiting to be changed. For most of his life, he had believed towers were built from money, ambition, and control. He knew better now. The strongest foundations were made from trust, earned slowly, truth spoken bravely, and love chosen freely after every reason to run. By spring, the rooftop garden opened on the tower's highest terrace. It had apple trees and planters, yellow flowers like the ones Evelyn used to buy from the street vendor, and a small model bridge designed by Noah himself. Employees from Whitmore Holdings came with their families for the opening. So did former residents from Queens legal aid workers, housing advocates, and neighbors who had known Evelyn before the world learned her name. Reporters asked for a statement. Adrian gave them one sentence. My wife taught me that a home is not a property. It is a promise. Evelyn stood beside him. Noah between them, her hand resting lightly on her son's shoulder. She no longer looked like a woman hiding from a dynasty or pretending to belong in a billionaire's world. She looked like herself, a mother, a survivor, a strategist, a woman who had walked through storms and refused to let them define the weather of her child's life. Later, when the cameras were gone and the guests had drifted away, Noah ran across the terrace, chasing bubbles in the spring air. Adrian and Evelyn watched him from beneath a young apple tree. Do you ever miss being invisible? Adrian asked. Evelyn thought about it. Sometimes, but invisibility is lonely. And this, she leaned her head against his shoulder. This is louder. He laughed. But better, she added. Below them, New York moved in its endless rush, full of strangers, secrets, bargains, and impossible second chances. Above it all, in a garden that had once been only a child's drawing, a family stood together beneath the open sky. The marriage that began as a lie had become the one true thing neither of them had known how to ask for. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Carter Whitmore did not check the exits before she smiled.